Hi everyone, welcome back. It's another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 96. And now the NBA regular season has come to a close, so let's preview the play-in action and the matchups we know for the NBA playoffs. If you guys are new to Spectator Sports, please do us a massive favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps us grow. If you want clips from this episode, you can get that here on YouTube, or check out our Instagram and TikTok pages. Links are in the description, and the full audio from this podcast is also linked in the description on Spotify. Breaking down the play-in tournament action, we start off with the 9-10 matchup, and this is not the most enticing game out of all the play-in games that we have, but we do have to break this down because the 9-10 does set up what could be the 8-9 matchup, and I don't expect either one of these teams to make noise, let alone even qualify in the NBA playoffs, but let's break this down. The Chicago Bulls, they've been missing Zach LaVine for quite some time, and it feels like it's going to be centered around DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, their probable defensive stalwart on the wing position. The Hawks have been working with an experiment with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, and this hasn't really turned into anything of fruition. They have been knocked out in the first round last year, and this year they probably won't even make the postseason. It is a toss-up to see who exactly will win. The Bulls have been playing pretty hard. They gave the Knicks a scare on Sunday, but I'm gonna pick the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll see what happens in the future, but I don't think either one of these teams are gonna qualify for the postseason. The Sixers and Heat meet up in the matchup of the 7 and 8 seeds, and these two teams have a lot of history, at least especially with Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid. Jimmy Butler used to be on the Philadelphia 76ers 4 years ago, but then left them in free agency because the Sixers chose Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler, who constantly reminds them what a big regret that was. Since joining Miami, Jimmy Butler has led the Heat to a 1 seed and a couple appearances in the NBA Finals, hasn't gotten over the hump, but is still far more progress than what we see with Joel Embiid leading the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel has returned from that meniscus tear, and he's looking pretty good. I wouldn't say he's 100%, but that rest, that rehab has been able to pay big dividends because the Sixers are ending the season pretty hot on an 8-game win streak, and I expect them to hold their own. They do have home court advantage in this, and while Jimmy Butler and also they get back Tyler Hero for the Miami Heat, they do pose somewhat of a threat. I think that the Sixers are the biggest dark horse in the NBA playoffs, and unfortunately for the Knicks, they could end up playing them in the first round. And with Joel Embiid, the way he was playing pre-meniscus injury was again on the path to being the scoring leader for a third time in a row and probably getting another MVP, but it didn't really work out that way. But now that Joel Embiid is back, I just don't think that in this matchup, Bam is just too small to guard a guy like Joel Embiid consistently. And I'm going to pick the Philadelphia 76ers to get the 7 seed, setting up a matchup with the New York Knicks. And with the Heat losing, it means that they would end up playing the Atlanta Hawks in an 8-9 matchup, and makes sense to just stick with the Jimmy Butler-led Miami Heat. They have the veteran leadership there. They have the advantage, I think, in home court. And it just feels that they have a little bit more than what the Hawks have to offer. This means that they set up a matchup with the Boston Celtics in round 1. Out west, we know that there has been a little bit of a rivalry between these two California teams, the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors. 2 years ago, Golden State goes all the way to the NBA Finals and wins it after being left for dead. But since then, it's been a couple of years of turmoil centered around Draymond Green, who has been getting ejected, punching teammates in the face, punching opponents and kicking opponents. Whatever it is, he has been nearly on the brink of getting kicked out of the league. But now they renew this beef because last year, remember, he stomped on the chest of Domantas Sabonis in that first round matchup. But the Warriors end up winning that matchup entirely, which I thought was very impressive. Now, this go around, it's going to be a do or die situation for these teams. The loser is eliminated from postseason contention. And this could be the Warriors' last stand. They are older, they're slower, and they're too dependent on Steph Curry. This offseason, they're going to have to make major moves to ascend back up the Western Conference standings, who is already getting more and more competitive by the year. And this may be their last dance, who knows. I would think that they have enough firepower, and if they start off really hot, especially from outside, they have a shot. It's just that the Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, and the Kings, they're a faster team, and if they can get out on the break what they've been able to do in the year, I think this poses up a pretty bad matchup for the Golden State Warriors. So I'm going to lean and take the safe pick. I'm going to pick the Sacramento Kings to beat Golden State, and we'll see an offseason of major change with the Golden State Warriors. The Pelicans are hosting the LA Lakers. These two teams met on Sunday. The Lakers really needed that victory to set themselves up for a 7-8 matchup. Otherwise, they would have dropped as far as 10th. And that's a lot of uphill climbing just to make the postseason. But now, this begs the question, because you could win this matchup. It very clearly shows that the Pelicans don't match up well with the LA Lakers. Every time you've seen them this year, the LA Lakers have done really well against the New Orleans Pelicans. But if you win, you end up playing the 2-seeded Denver Nuggets, a team the LA Lakers have not beaten in the last couple of years. They struggled to contain Jokic, and then the guard action, the two-man game that they have over in Denver. So it may be strategic to tank that game and then drop to that 8th seeded matchup, where then you could risk yourself playing the Sacramento Kings, who are a matchup nightmare for the LA Lakers. They also don't really match up well with Golden State. They have lost the series in series for that. So it is a tough conundrum for LA. You could go up and it's a first round exit, or if you are able to set a do or die, it's going to take something where you have a certain matchup against OKC, which I do agree, but it's a question of, can they beat the 9 or 10 seeds to get even into that matchup with OKC? So in that, I think they will probably take care of business and just take their chances, hope that they end up playing Denver, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up losing and then it sets up a matchup with the Sacramento Kings, a team that they haven't beat for the last few seasons. Let's break down the known matchup in the NBA postseason so far. The Milwaukee Bucks are taking on the Indiana Pacers, and this is a really bad matchup for Milwaukee. They are the slowest team in the NBA, and they're going up against the fastest team in the Indiana Pacers, no pun intended. Now, with the Indiana Pacers, you have Tyrese Halliburton, the newly acquired Pascal Siakam, and those two have been working pretty well together so far. My only question is, can they handle the size disadvantage? Because, you know, with Brook Lopez, a healthy Giannis, Bobby Portis, that is a very intimidating front line. But I do think the pace does counterbalance that to the Pacers' favor. In 4 matchups against the Bucks, they went 3-1, and I think that is a tall telling sign that the Milwaukee Bucks still struggle defensively. And we don't even know about the health of Giannis Antetokounmpo heading into this matchup. I feel he will at least miss a game, if not 2, and it's going to be really big to see if the Bucks can even win both games. If they don't and get a split, that is still not do or die, because Giannis could come back for game 3, but you really hope that for the Bucks' sake that they can survive without him. I don't know if they can, and with that, I'm going to take an upset pick here already and take the Indiana Pacers just based on the unknown health of Giannis, and I'm going to say that they win in 6 games. The Cavs and Magic are meeting up in a 4-5 matchup, and I feel like this Magic team has really flown under the radar because they don't have a lot of household names. They just mostly have Paolo Banchero, the reigning Rookie of the Year, and he's done excellently. He ascended to an all-star this year, and they had a chance to even get as high as the 3 seed, but they are settling for the 5 seed, and that's still really good for them. I don't know about Cleveland. They've been just in and out of just being a good team and then a not so good team. Donovan Mitchell's health hasn't been the greatest, and he's going to have a tough matchup because this year Jalen Suggs has ascended into being one of the best defensive guards in the league. I don't know if he's going to make first team all defense, but he could make a second team all defense, and that's something really good. He has the length, he has the lateral quickness, and that is something that we've known to bother Donovan Mitchell. And so far in this experiment out in Cleveland, it hasn't been as what we originally expected it to be. Last year, they flamed out in 5 games against the New York Knicks, and I think that might happen this time. I'm going to take the Orlando Magic in 6 games, and they will go to the second round of the NBA playoffs. The Wolves and Suns, this is kind of an interesting matchup because the Suns came in with big expectations. They went all in with the trade for Bradley Beal, and then you set up what is a big three of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant. It's very top heavy, and we saw a lot of those issues come up because Bradley Beal got hurt. He missed a good chunk of time, about 20 odd games, and it just felt like they just couldn't get all the pieces to click at the same time. They are all available for the postseason run, and I think with Minnesota, they have also had some issues late because they had a really good lead on that 1 seed for much of the season, but then things kind of caught up and they're settling for the 3 seed led by Anthony Edwards, and he's going to provide his, and you have a very cerebral backup point guard in Mike Conley. But the question is about Cat, his health. He came back at the end of the regular season for a couple of games, and we don't know how healthy he may or may not be, but he certainly is someone to keep an eye out for. That is a matchup that I think that they can really expose because we know that the Suns lack size. I feel like if any one of these first round playoff matches is to go 7, it's probably this one between the Suns and the Wolves. So in this, it's really tight, but I'm going to pick the Minnesota Timberwolves in 7 games, and then Anthony Edwards will finally get past the first round of the NBA playoffs for the first time in his career. The biggest, most juiciest matchup so far is the 4-5 matchup out west with the LA Clippers taking on the Dallas Mavericks, and this is part 3 of Luka versus the Clippers. First 2 times he was a baby in the bubble, and he had that amazing buzzer beater to make it 2-2, but they ended up losing it in 6. The next year was a really weird series where every road team won up until game 7, and you saw the LA Clippers get by the Dallas Mavericks for the second year in a row. But I don't know how exactly this will work out. I would be really surprised to see how the Clippers really mesh because right now we haven't seen Kawhi Leonard play since April started. He's been out the last 8 games with some knee inflammation, and this is again a question of whether Steve Ballmer is going to be invested in this core group of guys with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. The last couple of years, but one or the other hasn't been available for the postseason run. Kawhi will really need to figure out a way to get onto the court because I think that is really the only chance the Clippers have right now. The Mavericks are playing like one of the best teams in NBA right now. I think they're definitely the 3rd best team right now because of recently how they've played. And since the All-Star break, they've been phenomenal. Luka Doncic is a MVP contender, could even win the whole award this year. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mavs end up upsetting them. It wouldn't even be that big of an upset. I think they're only separated by a game when it comes down to final standings. And this time he has more help. It's not just Maxi Kleber and Tim Hardaway Jr. They have Kyrie Irving. And I think that is something that will help the Dallas Mavericks out. And I think at this point, I'm going to pick the Dallas Mavericks in a 6-game series. They win in 6 and they go to the second round. Coming into this year, there were a lot of teams that had big expectations, but I feel like a handful have underwhelmed. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks got Damian Lillard. They traded away Drew Holiday. And it's had some days where it hits really well, where you think the Bucks are up there with some of the best teams in the NBA, but then remember that they're one of the worst teams in defensive rating and they just cannot guard out on the perimeter. That's just giving up all your defense out on the wing for some offense, better offense than what Drew Holiday provides, but we can see now that it hasn't been the best fit so far. And with the head coaching controversy with Adrian Griffin, and then you have Doc Rivers making every excuse under the sun, we don't know what this Bucks came to do. If they were to get upset by the Indiana Pacers, I'm not sure exactly what that means because it makes sense that you would maybe blow it up. Giannis would have lost it by then and demand a trade out, or maybe they run it back. I'm not sure, but it's a very big possibility that we may not see this Milwaukee Bucks team as presently constructed and Giannis being a Milwaukee Buck for life. Another team, the Phoenix Suns, they traded for Bradley Beal, and you thought This is the missing piece. They get extra offense in there, but Brad has been in and out of the lineup, especially the early part of the year, and they're stuck as the 6th seed. They barely escaped the play-in tournament this year, and it is disappointing on many standards, and I'm not sure what that translates for them going forward. The Suns certainly have a big offseason approaching them if they choose to make some more modification. I do think that they will run it back just like the Bucks would, because it would make sense just because you have an extra year. But it is certainly another year of disappointment, and that's a team that is focused around Kevin Durant. Now, you have the LA Clippers. They're opening up this big stadium, the Intuit Dome, and they have the core, the duo of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and it hasn't translated to anything great. They've had a couple years where you had big expectations, and this year you thought, especially with them being tied for the 1 seed in February, they'd had a little bit of a swirl, and you bring in James Harden. There's a lot of star power on this team, but they just don't live up to expectations. This year, if they don't end up beating the Dallas Mavericks and they exit in the first round, who is to say that Steve Ballmer just loses his patience and trades away, or just decides to blow up the team? There's a lot of tradable assets here. You could maybe work on getting that back into the future and rebuilding this team, or you can use some of that to retool the roster. The question is who stays and who goes. For Kawhi, it's not really a tradable asset because we don't know how healthy he will be come postseason time. For Paul, he has been in and out of the lineup, that is true, but he is at least a little bit more reliable, and you will see him in more games than you would Kawhi Leonard, and I think that's where maybe he would be the guy that ends up getting traded. But it is a slippery slope. But that's another team to watch out if they were to blow things up. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Clips from this podcast, you can get that on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Links are in the description. Plus, the audio from this is also linked in the description. Shout out to Joey, the best producer in the game. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.